if the prognosis is good and we can potentially try just, sobriety and therapy and support and things like that, that is a much easier thing to deal with, I think, than the other alternatives, right?
Right.
As a parent, yeah. I mean, and I think that's why it's so critical. Graham and I were talking about this last week. Going to a place like New Waters and getting this kind of evaluation should actually be the first step that you take.
I agree.
Into any consideration. It's like you go and you get your health assessment. They draw every lab possible. They take your weight. They go look at your nutrition. And, you blow in the little tube. You're like, oh, great. My lungs work. So why are we not doing that?
Good afternoon. My name is Graham Durgee, and I'm the founder and CEO of New Waters Recovery in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to our weekly podcast, Finding New Waters. Our goal in creating Finding New Waters is to provide a resource for families to help navigate the complexities of supporting a loved one struggling with substance use or mental health. When we find ourselves in crisis due to one of these issues, most people have no idea where to turn. We hope to shed some light onto what is often the darkest hour for many families. I'm joined here today by our Executive Director, Justin McClendon, and Dr. Sheila Shilati. Dr. Shilati has been in the field of behavioral health for more than 20 years. She has served as an international ambassador and participant on 2 separate expeditions in the Middle East and Africa, working directly with victims of natural disasters and HIV and AIDS. She has guest lectured at several universities and colleges, including California State University, Pepperdine University, California Lutheran University, and Oxnard College. Sheila has served as a media consultant for various outlets to discuss general trends in the rehabilitative industry, and Sheila has served as Chief Operating Officer for more than 13 years at Seasons Recovery Centers. She oversees all day-to-day management, including but not limited to standards of practice, employee relations, licensing, organizational compliance, and corporate infrastructure. She is highly regarded for her leadership, integrity, and cultivating a culture of inclusivity and equity. Sheila received her BA from the University of California at Santa Barbara in 2001 and her doctorate degree from the Phillips Graduate Institute in 2009. That's a very nice bio. Yes, you're very well qualified to be on this podcast and obviously to discuss substance use and kind of the work that we do here on a daily basis. And I would love to just start off, getting a little bit more background and just kind of, your personal story, how you came into this work, what drove you to this work, and just how you came to it.
Well, I mean, my original intention in life was to be a very successful writer in New York City. So clearly that worked out super well.
Right.
I had a dream.
We make plans and God laughs at them.
Generally, yeah. He's like, oh, what's your plan for today? Let me see what I've got going on.
Right.
I was fortunate. I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, this work kind of really finds us. Right. I mean, we have our own personal journeys. We have our experiences that contribute to kind of our passions or how we want to be of service. Obviously, at one point in my life, I thought I was going to save the world and made attempts to do so, whatever that may have looked like. But then I got realistic and in terms of more pragmatic and what was going to be applicable. And I think administration and entrepreneurship and just kind of business was a natural fit. I think I just really like also telling people what to do. So that's but on the flip side, I think, just the deep fascination and depth of understanding, the human construction on an emotional and behavioral level, and the recognition that we're all just really wounded and we're just all seeking a way to feel seen and heard at the core of all of everything that we go through, right, is to just be a part of. So kind of this work, I mean, that's that bio, like I was like, oh, that's a few years old. I mean, I'm in my 13th year now. with Seasons. What a privilege and a beautiful opportunity to be of service, and cultivated that beautiful organization and relationship with the people and the clients and the staff that are all there. But it all kind of started as a way of just an entry point through, just working clinically with clients, and then kind of morphed into something that felt more developmental and things that I can really contribute to on a more systemic level, and then kind of what happens from there. And obviously relationships with great individuals that, I was just having this conversation, the connection we have as a community of providers. I mean, and I'll speak, candidly enough to say, New Waters has represented themselves extraordinarily well with a very personal situation of mine. And not only was I thoroughly impressed, which is hard to do because I hold a pretty high standard, but just the comfort and the ease at which, when we really come together to collaborate and to be of service to this really wounded and deeply, needing community, it's really a beautiful gift. So my route here was circuitous, but yet it's like when I came in, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but now as a mature adult, adulting my way through life, in many ways, I'm like, oh, I understand more of my purpose of why I'm here now and how I serve.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too that, what you kind of just touched on there, that what I was thinking of was, yes, we have such it's an amazing industry, right? Because it's a very intimate, very small industry in so many regards, where we all kind of know each other, and like all the kind of good providers and the good ethical programs are all kind of work very closely together and kind of hand in hand and refer patients and all that. And it's really a beautiful thing. And it's just it's kind of perplexing because families have no idea how to access that, right?
Right.
And it's so perplexing, like how, and that's why we created this podcast. Was one of the kind of core reasons was that we wanted to create resources for people and get that information out there. Like, what is an intervention? What is, what all this information that we take for granted and we just know so intimately what to do is, as I said, kind of people's worst hour, right? And so it's a complex issue, and I don't know what the answer is at this point, but hopefully, just getting content out there and having conversations like this and destigmatizing things, and just having those conversations will help.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, go ahead. Good.
No, I was just going to mention when you were saying that. So we have one of our staff members that recently switched positions and is now working in a continued care department, and it was just really an interesting observation. So she's been doing that job for about a couple of weeks now, so like very, very early in that process. And she actually just said to me yesterday, she was like, I had no idea that, just kind of talking about the treatment community in general across the country, because she's just dove right in and she's talking to facilities all over the place. And she's like, I had no idea, as big as this community is, it seems like everybody knows each other. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of true, which is neat.
All the good people know each other.
That's true. There you go.
Right. So,
there you go.
There's obviously places that are not operating on ethical grounds, and those are typically the places that are kind of like under the rafter or whatever the term is. But yeah, I mean, it is very interesting how we all kind of, work very closely together, and however we can kind of create these resources for people is just going to be so beneficial moving forward. So now, one of the things that we kind of talked about when we were thinking about a topic of discussion here, and I love to talk about Seasons of Malibu too, maybe before we get into that, and just, tell us a little bit about Seasons, and specifically, what do you guys focus on? What's your kind of niche? What's your perfect client? And if you can just kind of tell us a little bit about the program.
Yeah, perfect client, a motivated one, right?
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Please come in. I mean, I will say I've been fairly fortunate. We're a privately owned organization, so it's afforded me an extraordinary amount of flexibility and capacity to attend to the client's needs in a variety of ways without kind of having to go to the higher up. So what do you think? Or, cost containment in the same way you think about it if a venture capital firm owns the organization, and just kind of the bureaucracy of all of that. So, with Seasons, being there as long as I have, I've got the good fortune of a high level of staff retention. Call it visionary leadership. No, I mean it's really just,
which is not hard, which is not easy to do. I mean, we're dealing with this here, and there's so much turnover in this field, unfortunately, because it is just the burnout is so high. It's high intensity. It's, it really is a tough thing to do. So, I mean, I would love to understand how you have such great retention as well.
I think it's a lot of, I don't know if it's a secret as much as it is just attending to the people that are caring for the people coming in, care for your people. And I know that in a lot of ways, people appreciate that in financial compensation. That makes sense. But I think the value, I think there's a lot of people that also understand the value of being able to shoot their supervisor in text and say, I need a mental health day. I'm feeling burnt out, and there not being any consequences to that. Feeling like you can come and talk to the COO if you need to problem solve. There's not this way. I've also learned the benefit of great boundaries and not being as accessible. There's kind of this way that I have a responsibility to attend and pay attention, but it's also in just the little things, knowing the names of all of your employees and information about them, that it's relational at the end of the day. They feel, if your employees feel seen, then they feel taken care of. If they know that upper management is just taking the time to ask them, oftentimes I'll bring people in and I'll sit them down in the office and go, what would you like to do? Where do you see yourself? How can I help you achieve that goal? And I'm not sure there's too many COOs that are willing to kind of engage in that way and really take a genuine interest. I'm not sure, at the end of the day, you're going to have some level of turnover. It's the nature of some of these entry-level positions and people are figuring it out. But I think that trickles down to the client experience, right? And what people have come and what Seasons is kind of known for is that level of caretaking and attention to and quality control. And that's where I get, maybe my own control issues come up. Great. This is a good purpose for them to be incorporated and utilized because that representation matters. It matters for the referent who's sending the individual or trying for them to decide where they want to go and offering them appropriately 3 different choices. And, but it's different when I get on the line and I have an accountability to them now. Now the client is going, okay, we were on that call. You said, so it kind of takes away the pressure of the referent having to feel like, oh my God, I'm on edge. Are they going to follow through? Because then I just, the organization I take over, we have a very collaborative engagement, transparency. So it actually makes the process pretty seamless. And listen, we have extraordinary care and sophisticated treatment, but even when we don't bat 1,000, there's no questions as to why it didn't work out.
Right.
Nobody's left in the dark going, well, who didn't communicate this to me? And why didn't I know about X, Y, and Z? So, we're 24 beds in Malibu, all luxury homes, 4 of them. 3 of them are licensed for primary substance use, dual diagnosis. And we do have a license that treats primary mental health. So I think I always want to make the distinction. People say they treat it. We're actually licensed to treat it and have been since 2017. It's a big difference, right? People, super often gets confused, but we have doctors that only treat licensed doctors.
Well, and those are some of those questions that people don't know to ask, right? And that's, kind of the point of highlighting some of those things are like, what are the questions that we ask when we're calling these facilities, right?
Right.
So, you don't know what you don't know. So that's an awesome point. I love that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And it's just that we don't, again, no offense against like interns trying to get their hours, but when you're paying the kind of money you do to come to Seasons, you want to see experts in their field, licensed professionals 100%. That have been doing this a long time.
And correct me if I'm not wrong, all of your therapists are doctorate level?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
All of them. Yeah.
Which is pretty unique. There's not a lot of programs that have their whole clinical team as doctorate level candidates. So that's huge.
Thank you. And again, it's if we've invested, it's been in the, you get those feedback forms at the end that gives like I'm always proud to say we get two of the highest ratings in terms of those feedback surveys. One of them being they got what they expected to get, and the clinical was top notch, and the second one is I do have a lot of pride around it. And the second one being, up to 95% of people would refer a friend or a loved one back, to come and receive services. So it's something that I think we genuinely, I go, listen, if we nailed it on those things, fantastic. You didn't love the food on Tuesday? No worries. I can deal with that. You're
That's not as important.
The 5 quilted standard that you were hoping. Okay, these are manageable. So it just, everybody's different. But I treat adults, that's kind of my mentality. I treat people that are highly motivated. I really assess for the fit in the milieu. I don't have to take everybody. It's a great position to be in. We've earned it. We've really worked hard to get here. And we feel really, really good. So we stay in our lane. We do good work. We work with our collaborators and just kind of keep it clean.
Well, and I actually was just out there visiting your program last week, so I saw it in person live, and it is absolutely fabulous. So, we definitely highly recommend it to really anybody who needs the services. And, kind of to change pace here a little bit, one of the things that we kind of talked about last week and leading up to this was, the increase in cannabis-induced psychosis, right? And we've been seeing a whole lot of that. I know, Justin, you can speak to that extensively, but let's talk a little bit about, just the increase in that, the Delta 8, the, all these synthetic drugs that are coming online and obviously being sold in gas stations everywhere. But how's your experience been out there in California, and what are you guys seeing out there?
Probably similar to yours. I'd love to hear your experience as well. It's been, largely initially it was kind of anecdotal and head scratching, where we would get these cases of perfectly healthy, generally mostly leaning towards men, but we get some women that would have either an acute psychotic episode or, instances of more chronic psychosis, but you didn't have this kind of genesis of kind of correlation of how you can route where it came from per se, So when you're looking at it diagnostically, you're trying to kind of rule out, okay, were you prodromal and did this come on? Maybe they don't have a significant family history. It just didn't quite add up. But the one thing the through line that was consistent was daily cannabis use starting from a fairly young age. Or maybe it was intermittent, but then it peaked up at like 18 to like 22, whatever.
Right. Yep.
There's this way in which then it turns into this complete departure from like normative functioning. And it just, everyone, the family system, the client, it looks like a true psychotic break.
Right.
So we would get clients that, were on the top of like bridges, ready to jump in the middle of a psychotic break, or they were taken down by the police because they were running naked in the streets, and
most of these cases are young adults primarily.
Yeah, I would say, we treat solely 18 and older, but, I imagine you hear it even more in adolescence. But for us, it's like that 22, 26, 27.
Yeah.
And now when I kind of hear the symptoms of the presentation, and we'll get the kind of conceptualization, I'm like, did they smoke pot every day? They're like,
yeah.
I'm like, okay. So it's been this kind of really terrifying epidemic that I think is starting to really take shape. And we as providers, I think we're having more and more discussions. The research is starting to give us more information. There's no argument against the potential and the active piece of an acute psychotic episode due to cannabis intoxication. I think the professionals all agree that is very real. That happens. It's just the duration at which that occurs is typically while it's active in your body and doing its thing. The more kind of evidence that is leaning towards, and again, there's a ton of confounding variables why we have chronic psychosis, chronic thought disorders, any of those things. So you kind of are peeling it out. But safe to say that daily cannabis use at a young age can certainly exacerbate the potential for somebody to kind of activate those symptoms within the changing of the brain structure. And then now you've got your 25-year-old who will have to be on, mood stabilizers for the rest of their life.
Yeah, 100%. It's scary. And, I had a little experience with this with my nephew, who we put into a treatment program when he was about 16. He went to a wilderness program out in Utah, and he had a great experience and ended up staying out there for a year and finishing school out there. And it really was a great thing. But when my brother, called me and they were having an issue and trying to kind of figure out, luckily he had me to call to say, what do we do here? And I was able to kind of put him in touch with the appropriate people and got him in touch with an educational consultant because I was just too close to the case, right? And I needed somebody else to step in and really manage it. And the piece with what I told my brother was, listen, he's 16 years old. The reality that he's going to be sober for the rest of his life is very unlikely, right? But we can plant the seed at this point and we can start to do some work. And if we can even get him from like 16 to 18 or 19 without smoking weed every day, like that's a big win, right? So, he's now in college at the University of Denver and he's doing really well. And he's not, sober, quote unquote, but he's handling it. And maybe he wasn't an addict, right? And maybe he was just spiraling out at some point and just never crossed that threshold at that point. And we were able to kind of catch it soon enough. Time will tell. But even if that happens, like we know what to do and he knows what to do, right? He's been through this. He has so much self-awareness. He's gotten so much education around it. So he kind of knows what to do in that scenario. But, I do think that and with legalization of cannabis out in California, I just wonder if you saw any correlation there when they legalized weed and a spike in this, psychosis or anything like that. But, the thing that even concerns me more is the Delta 8 and all the synthetic, substances that are being sold and the THCA and the, God knows what new strain or, chemical they've created. So, I feel like that is really the stuff, being here in North Carolina where kids can't get weed very easily, or legally, and they're just going and buying this Delta 8 stuff and it's lighting them on fire.
Yeah. And that's, I was thinking the same thing about the legalization in California and how, maybe that what your observations are around that, Dr. Shilati. But here, to your point, Graham, so we see the same thing, especially in our assessment track. I mean, we do see individuals coming in to the detox kind of part of our program that are showing a similar presentation, but we have seen a lot of it in the assessment track. Similar to your point, Dr. Shilati, is that, the parents, whoever else is involved, they're scratching their heads, right? They're like, hey, this is going on. There's been this psychotic episode. There's been hospitalization. There's been a suicide attempt. There's no history of this. There's the THC use. And we've just got same as you said. I mean, we've gotten to the point where it's like immediately you're like, we know exactly what's going on here. We've seen this a number of times already. But here, I mean, we do have a lot of people that come in from outside of the state for that assessment program, but a lot of them are within North Carolina where it's not legal yet. So it's these Delta derivatives and things like that. But yeah, so anyways, long way to get to that same question is, so I wonder what your observations have been since the legalization in California, because I would imagine that is totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and I think, remember, everybody had their medical card before it got
Right. So it's been a while.
Yeah,
I mean, what
it's been a
has it
while.
20 years? Or?
At least.
Okay.
At least. Yeah. So kind of the introduction of the legalization of cannabis, is something we've been attempting to look at and listen, I think the reality is every the medicinal purposes, the application of, the uses of, when under appropriate measures and oversight, has tremendous impacts and effects. We know that. You can't argue with the literature that supports this. So, I want to be careful not to create this kind of, idea that my opinion on any of this is inserted. I think we're just kind of speaking to a reality as a parent. We're all parents. This is something we have to think about. And I think we kind of have this we've kind of taken a social exhale that like, okay, cannabis is okay. It's all right. Like my kids doing it. It's not the worst thing they can be doing,
Right.
But
unless they have an underlying mental health issue, right?
Right.
Which you don't know, you're not going to know until they're 20. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Come on, man. Do you ever see something that's like, oh, I have no issue at all?
Yeah, seriously.
Some spectrum of like
100%.
You spend enough time on social media, you have some sort of like generalized anxiety disorder.
Totally.
Sure. Absolutely.
So yes, the severity, the prodromal effects, the attention to parent attitudes. A lot of parents smoke with their kids, so I'm not I'm the bearer of fun, not the takeawayer of fun. But at the same time, I think there needs to be such a deep sense of understanding and education that you're 16, you're 18, you're 20-year-old, you're 22-year-old, we all know the developing brain works, is still working towards finishing up by 25, 28, maybe a little bit later for males, because it's okay. You guys are a little slower than them, no big deal.
Knew that was coming.
Catching up. No, but we're it's scary. Like I really do mean to insert some of that kind of reality and kind of the fear and being more vigilant about teenagers really kind of getting into this and what this means. And it's funny too, you think about it in this way, because just because we can't see what's going on with the brain, and but if like we smoke cannabis and it gave you like acne, right?
Right.
Right.
Like most of the time, people will be like, oh, I don't really, anything specific, or, oh, you'd get these bumps on your arms or what. It's like, if we can see it, you're like, oh, that's not really for me,
Right. Totally.
Inverse. Like if we were talking about, somebody having cancer and going, okay, here's this thing that's going to save you, and actually
100%.
It's just, I think our the way we kind of, the lens in which we think about things and normalize it is
very distorted.
Very distorted. 100%. But that's the society. Everything's distorted. So
everything's yes.
Find your path.
That's the truth. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
I'm curious what you guys are seeing at the detox there, and especially in your evaluations, because you guys have such resources and accessibility to kind of what kind of through lines are you guys coming up with?
Well, especially when it comes to the cannabis topic specifically, I mean, we have had a lot of luck with, this particular kind of like, this particular client that we're talking about, right? Young adult, as you mentioned, a lot of times male. Actually, I would struggle to think of a time where it was a female right now, right off the top of my head. But, that has a similar presentation. So we can get a lot of history. We can understand about what's going on with the substance use, where it came from, if there's any causation there and things like that. But as you mentioned, Dr. Shilati, I think like the effects and the presentation that we're seeing with that person is very neurological in nature. We've seen a lot of success just in simply the person, discontinuing the use and being able to remain sober, and just kind of the natural healing process that can take place there. We've seen a lot of young adult males be able to, stabilize here, get some good data, but tracking them also over that next, 3 months, 6 months period to see kind of what's going on, and have seen a ton of success in them being able to clear and really not to have any kind of recurrence of any of those psychotic symptoms or anything like that. But then unfortunately, there are some times, as you alluded to where maybe the damage is just it's a little bit more permanent, right? And there's going to be some pharmacological intervention that's needed in order to kind of stabilize. And then unfortunately not seeing as much of that clearing, and it becomes a pretty obvious situation to where they're going to need some type of medication for the foreseeable future in order to remain stable. But yeah, it's very interesting how, the occurrence of what's going on is very neurological in nature. As to where I think, not to say that it's so drastically different from other substances. I mean, everybody comes about that however they come about it, right? Whether there's trauma, there's other things, it's experimental use. I mean, like, however they got there, they got there. So some of that part is the same, but how it affects them and the severity of the symptoms and things like that is very, very brain based,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you take into consideration, like if someone comes in, they're diabetic and they go, okay, yeah, no, you're susceptible to this, this, and this, they have information to go, oh gosh, but when we're not given that information, we don't have that. And you're just kind of, filling your brain with whatever substance. Yeah. I mean, we all get this and understand this. And the more that it's all about education at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Systemically, we've seen a greater incidence of people just talking about their mental health and exposing more to mental health and giving opportunities for us to normalize mental health. I mean, I can't even go to my kid's school now without every parent talking about who their therapist is. We're just like, who you got? Oh, you got so-and-so? Okay, fantastic. Are they open? Do they have an opening? So it's nice to kind of like work towards normalizing that and that experience, and it not being like in our community or in recovery, we're just like, I think we take for granted that we're so accustomed to these conversations that you forget how the rest of the world often operates, and we're in a beautiful position to continue. And I love that you guys are doing this to just educate and give access to, because it's important information, and we're gonna have our own ideas.
It is, and I think, I don't know, it just came up for me when you were saying that the education piece. I think it's also just really refreshing a lot of the times. Again, unfortunately, sometimes there's more of a permanent situation that's resulted from this. But a lot of times, when the families come in and they're scratching their heads, they don't know what's going on. There's been this event. For us to be able to do the assessment and sit back and say, like, hey guys, this is very likely caused by the cannabis that you're using, right? Yeah. It at least gives them like a target, something to focus on. It's like, okay, like, my son doesn't have, schizophrenia, right? Or there's not some other kind of organic condition that is going to be kind of, life altering for him and also for our family system. But it's like, okay, like, this is a thing, right? So it's almost like a relief, I think, in some ways, right? That like, okay, well, if the prognosis is good and we can potentially try just, sobriety and therapy and support and things like that, that is a much easier thing to deal with, I think, than the other alternatives, right?
Right.
As a parent, I mean, and I think that's why it's so critical. Graham and I were talking about this last week. Going to a place like New Waters and getting this kind of evaluation should actually be the first step that you take in any 100%. Consideration. It's like you go and you get your health assessment. They draw every lab possible. They take your weight. They go look at your nutrition. You blow in the little tube. You're like, oh, great. My lungs work. So why are we not doing that on a mental health?
100%.
Right?
Agreed.
You just kind of go to one targeted thing and you're like, this is it. It's just this right here. We can.
Yeah. This is it. And we know these guys do pretty good work. So it's not even like, we're going to send to this program because of this therapist that specializes in this, will work well with this client. Right. And I think that's where we need to get really granular. But you're 100% on the money.
No, and that's just it. Mm-hmm.
It's so funny that it's true. And obviously we are biased and we believe that as well, right? We should do good assessment before there's recommendation and treatment, right? Mm-hmm. But it's just interesting that our industry doesn't handle it that way. But if you go back to like the graduate school days, right, Dr. Shilati, like that's what we were taught, is that you assess before you do anything else. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately in our industry, like we just don't really do that.
Well, we're trying to change that.
We're trying to change it. That's right.
Yeah. So I would love to know. So remind me again how many kids you have?
2.
Two. That's
Two
right.
kids.
Boy,
Yeah,
girl.
yeah.
That's right. You had
Yes,
two,
this
and
is a girl.
you were
Yeah.
done. Where I had three
Cool.
girls, and we're still trying for a boy. So, not really. But anyway, I just wanted to know, like, have you put some thought into like how you're going to navigate that with your kids? You know, I think about that all the time. I don't have an answer really at this point because my kids are still, 9, 8, and 5. But like, yeah, at some point, probably in the near future, we're going to start having those conversations about cannabis and about, what their friends are doing and all this stuff. I having 3 daughters, my like biggest fear is obviously like an eating disorder issue or anything like that. And, because that just to me is just so complex, and it's, it's substances, we can stop using substances, but you got to eat, right? So such a different animal. But I just would love to hear kind of what your thoughts are around that and how to kind of have those early conversations with kids.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I get as far, my kids are like 6 and almost 3. So we've got some
They're
time,
young
thank
too.
goodness. So my stress is really related to making sure like they get dressed in the morning in time to get out the door without like a tantrum or,
Right.
the
Sure.
necessity to negotiate. It's a
Right.
constant. Yeah, so the problem, oh gosh, I was about to curse and I stopped myself and I'm so proud.
It's curse-free zone.
The hardest part, I think, about us having the knowledge that we do is just that. I think we're super sensitive and hypersensitive to the impacts and having the awareness around environmental factors, interactions, school-based interactions, romantic interactions, what they're exposed to on television, their processes and ideologies around, who they want to be and narrative, on and on and on. So, and to recognize kind of how that forms and shapes their imprinting, that then generates the like narrative of, good enough, not good enough, value, it just, we can kind of compartmentalize each one of these and have an hour-long discussion on it.
Totally.
So I think, one of the benefits and of being in a city that I think is more progressive than most when it comes to social emotional considerations, and in school systems that think about it that way, is that they're already learning tools to exercise that muscle in an effective way. And it's being endorsed by the school system. It's being endorsed by the family system. I mean, we're all like kids of baby boomers, so we have lots of stories to tell about, managing our parents' expectations and lack of oversight and, boundaries, what boundaries? You see the memes.
We'll just sweep it under the rug. We're not going to talk about that. That's uncomfortable.
Right. What are these feelings? What are these emotions? So I even find myself struck sometimes too when I'm like recognizing how well my daughter might be discussing like a feeling or an experience. Or she said to me the other day, she goes, well, Mama, like, that's my thinking and I get to change my mind if I want to. And I was like,
right. Yeah. But you're like, whoa.
You are correct. Yes, you do. But still do as I tell you to.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
No,
Go ahead.
No, you go. I would cut you off.
Yeah. But it is just that we're developing the generations behind ours are developing better tools than we had to talk about these things.
Absolutely.
So my hope is that translates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, like at least in my house, my wife and I are both in recovery, so they've never been in a house with substances, alcohol. Like there's no booze in our house, and friends come over, and I'm fine with having alcohol in the house and having friends drink and all that stuff. But for the most part, they're just not around it. It's not a thing. They don't even know what it really is. So I think that like growing up in that environment probably will have some sort of a shift for them too, and just not kind of where I grew up. It was cocktail every evening. That's what you did. At the end of the day, you had your cheese and crackers and your scotch on the rocks, and that was how you handled life. So
And the other thing too is, and I think about this a lot because I mean I don't know about you, Dr. Shilati, but I think for me and Graham anyway, we take a little bit of work home with us from time to time. But I think they wind up hearing the phone calls and the this and then that.
Right.
So there's also this like this layer of exposure to like, what the dangers or the downsides of using, alcohol and other substances can look like, right? So I think that, I hope anyway, knock on wood somewhere, that's can also add some value for them, right?
100%. And listen, if there's ever a problem, we know what to do.
Right? There's that.
That's kind of the benefit, right? I think that's the gift of doing what we do, or having the resources, or knowing that, it's just like your relative or your friend being an MD, right? Or being an attorney. I don't hesitate to get their free feedback.
Absolutely.
Yes. Be like, man, so
yeah.
Or I'll literally send pictures. I'll be like, what is this? My friend.
I love it. Well, it's better than WebMD. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, takes away the hypochondriasis.
There you go.
Well, I mean, this has been a great conversation, and I really, really appreciate you coming on and just sharing us a little bit about your program and your heart and, all this. It's always so nice connecting with you and collaborating on cases and all of that. So can you just share with people where everybody can find you, maybe your website and possibly like maybe social media or something?
Yeah. First off, I have zero social media. So,
good for you.
I don't even have a LinkedIn, which I get yelled at often.
All right.
I know, this is how incognito.
Don't worry. We'll get you up to speed. I'll come out there. We'll sit down.
Right? I know, right? You'll be like, here you go. Listen, I checked on my phone. I'll give you this quick tidbit and I'll give you the website. But it's seasonsmalibu.com, and that will have all the information. But I don't ever check the stats on how many times you pick up your phone in a day. It's terrifying. It's very.
Oh, I didn't know there was that stat.
There is.
I want to see
how much time you spend on which app. How much? Basically, it's like how much time you waste.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna look at that.
My count.
I am not gonna look at that.
Like 100 was like 140 in one day of like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll start having we'll just compare and then send each other screenshots on how dysfunctional we are.
It's like the new
with our technology
circle.
Right. Not doing well today. 6,000 steps, and I pick up my phone 250 times.
Exactly.
Not a productive day. So fun talking to you, Dr. Shilati.
Yes,
Thank you, ma'am. And we'll see you soon. And seasonsmalibu.com if you guys want any information on Seasons. And always you can reach out to us at nuwatersrecovery.com. Thank you all. Have a great day.